Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we're going to be talking about Week 9 IDP recap and our IDP Pro tip of the week for Week 10. With us today as a special guest making his first appearance on Front Office Pros, which is none other than Tripp Brebner. He is a Dynasty and IDP writer, ranker, and extraordinaire with Football Guys. Tripp, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, man, glad to do it. Appreciate y'all having me on, and look forward to talking some football with y'all.
Hike!
That's right, talking some ball. So, Tripp, why don't you start us off? Who was your stud from Week 9?
I was the guy that just kind of came out of nowhere, and that's Byron Young, the rookie edge rusher with the Los Angeles Rams. This guy's kind of a fascinating story. He's from rural South Carolina. The closest program to him was Coastal Carolina, and nothing else was within 2 hours of him. And this guy took 2 years off of football, then was working at Dollar General, and now he's in the NFL as a 25-year-old rookie and is starting edge defenders, played in high volume. He and Michael Hoyt are the only two edge defenders playing a lot of volume out there in LA. And Young really came out and broke out. He really had his first blow-up game this week. Eight solo tackles, 2 assists, a tackle for loss, 2 sacks, forced fumble. I can't remember if it was a recovery or forced fumble, but blow-up game in a game that they lost because the offense couldn't move the ball at all against the Packers. And it's fascinating to look through this guy and look at his history, and has some athletic ability, 9.22 relative athletic score. It's Kentley Platt tracks at ras.football. And I was looking through some numbers too. It's like, it's like, all right, well, has Young really been good? It's like, he has 22 pressures according to Pro Football Reference, which ranks 9th in the NFL. So as a 25-year-old rookie, I mean, that's the same number as 31 pressures. And whatever it is, the same number as Quinton Williams, which is like, that's pretty good company to be keeping. This is a guy, he's clearly outplayed Michael Hoyt on the other edge. So this is a guy to watch. This is a guy that has a pretty interesting schedule down the stretch. He has the Commanders and the Giants that are giving up sacks left and right. So that was kind of my breakout of the week. I was, of course, South Carolina homer. See, no, he didn't go to Clemson. He was with a AA school called Carver's Bay in South Carolina. It flew under the radar for recruiting purposes. So I'm glad to see the guy that find a home and put in the hard work and really break out in Los Angeles and have more upside than I think anybody imagined when he went in the third round of the 2023 NFL draft.
Yeah, the great call out by you there, Tripp. I actually was this close to picking him myself, so we've been talking about the same guy. But when it comes down to it, like you said, him being drafted in the third round, in the NFL draft, they had 2 Byron Youngs, right? They had the defensive tackle out of Alabama, and then they had him, right? But I remember even in the draft, I thought that he was a very intriguing prospect. And, him coming to LA, it helps having Aaron Donald. He commands so much attention in that defensive line. But I'm with you. 25 is definitely an older rookie, but he has performed very, very well. And I want to say he had 2 sacks, I believe, that game against the Packers. So this was definitely a coming up part. But he's been consistent. He's another radar guy. People aren't talking enough about him. He's really interesting. I mean, he's performing better than like Lucas Van Ness. You don't really hear much about him. Right. You're not hearing about the edge rusher Tyree Wilson, which I thought was a bust, by the way, from the beginning. But that's neither here or there. We're talking about Byron Young. But I do like it, and like you said, Commanders and Giants are easy pickings. So if you have him, you got to be pretty happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the troubling part with this Rams defense is at the start of the season, nobody really knew who a lot of these guys were. They're just piecing together. I mean, you got Aaron Donald, the mainstay, and then you're just like, who's going to produce for this defense? I mean, obviously, Ernest Jones, a linebacker as well, but everyone else is just like, who's going to come out? But the fact that, Michael Hoyt's been getting a lot of love there, but, now that Byron Young's coming on here, really showing out for this Rams defense.
So, Joe, who did you have as your stud from Week 9?
Yeah, I'm going to put some love out there for the DBs and go with Paulson Adebo, who had 7 tackles. 2 of those were solo, but he forced a fumble and recovered it, had 2 interceptions and 3 pass deflections on Sunday. I thought the tackle numbers are pretty impressive. The fact that he plays majority of this time is, outside corner. Typically, you see that for, slot corners have a higher tackle floor. And then he had a coverage grade, according to PFF, of a 92.8 as well. So he was really locked down and got targeted and took advantage of it.
Yeah, when it comes to Paulson Adebo, I was just looking. He's it's not looking good for me. He's a top 5 cornerback in our league, and I gave him to you for absolutely zero. I traded you Paulson Adebo. We were talking about this the other day. Paulson Adebo, John Franklin Myers, and I traded you one other guy, and I can't remember who it was, for Jonathan Abram. That was a horrible. After his 5th-year option was declined, I thought for whatever reason, I thought he could be good, but boy, that was a mistake on my part. But Adebo, man, I believe he's out of Stanford. It's always been a decent corner. What's nice about him is that he's across from Marshawn Lattimore. We know when you have a corner that's just an absolute stud that doesn't get a ton of targets, well, what happens? The other guy gets the targets, and he's doing really well because of it. But, yeah, I'm really regretting that trade with you. I wish I'd still had him.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you made it. And I believe the other player was Jordan Whitehead that I got as well.
That's right. Yeah.
That's interesting to have the numbers that he was able to put up, right? It's playing the Bears and undrafted free agent rookie Tyson Bagent, and he's putting up numbers as if he was in some kind of a track meet. So it was a fascinating breakout performance for sure.
So my stud from week 9, and I'm going to give some love to a different position as well, Joe, that they don't start enough. But how about interior defensive lineman Justin Matabuki? Now, you might be like, who is that? Well, he had 4 solo tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a QB hit, and a sack for the Baltimore Ravens. I believe 5 out of the past 6 games he's recorded a sack. Currently leads the league in sacks for interior defensive linemen at 8 total sacks. And I'm telling you what, guys, I'm kicking myself because I signed this guy in free agency. I thought he was in for a good year. I traded him for, you're not going to like this, but for Terrace Marshall. I got way too buzzed. The buzz was just going nuts. I believed him. We're not even going to talk about the Panthers. It was just bad. So, anyways, but I tell you what, man, he's having a career year. He's on pace to double his career high in sacks. His defensive grade by PFF was 75.2 this past week. And Joe, he's in a contract year, and we know what that means. He's ready to ball out so he can cash out. I don't know if the Ravens can afford him, but boy, he's playing well, and you got to be pretty happy if you have him on your roster.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not the first time we've referenced this guy as a stud either. So, just really been just continuing, like you said, his career year this far, and really looking for the payout.
It's a fascinating guy. He's got a sack in 6 straight games, I think, 5 or 6 straight games. And this is no week to sit him. He's got Cleveland this week. I think Cleveland's given up the most points to interior defenders of any team in the league, both as a soft interior pass rush or pass blocking unit. And the Browns will run the ball too, so they'll have some opportunities as a run defender. So I think Matabuki is interesting. It's not a lot of interior defensive linemen are coming out of these like third round type guys like Matabuki did. So many of our studs at the position are early draft picks that high profile guys that you had to pay up to get. And here's a guy in year 4 figuring it out and making an impact. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the defense around him. I think that Mike McDonald has come in and it's really made an impact. That defense is humming. You think about who they have rushing the passer: Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy and Owe and Ojabo are supposed to be the guys, and Ojabo's still hurt. Owe's missed some time with injury. And you've got some interesting pieces. I mean, the linebackers are playing really well. I mean, Patrick Queen looked like a bust until McDonald got there, and Queen looks like a decent NFL linebacker now. And you've got Geno Stone, I think was a 7th rounder, playing well at the safety position. So this unit is really gelled, and I really think a lot of Matabuki's production has been based on that defense just playing really effectively. So that being said, there's no reason to get bashful this week. Go ahead and stick him out there against the Browns, and we'll see if you can't beat up on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, those were great points. I was just, I was feeling the same way you were as far as the edge rushers. My view is when you're drafting, dynasty type players at an IDP setting, I look for pedigree. And the Baltimore Ravens just know how to draft pass rushers. They just have a knack for it. They end up developing them. They end up being really good. I was expecting Oweh and Ojabo would really take that next step. They just have been disappearing. So seeing Kyle Van Noy out there getting sacks, and Clowney, like you said, it's just like whatever McDonald's doing, he's really making that defense gel. You got Geno Stone playing better than Kyle Hamilton. It's like, what's going on over here? But nevertheless. So are you enjoying this video so far? Well, if you are, show your support to our new channel by hitting the subscribe button and liking this video. We'll be creating videos all NFL season long, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So going over to the duds, Tripp, who did you have as your dud from week 9?
Well, I thought I would stay in the same game, and another pass rusher also, but on the opposite side of the line of the field, which is Rashawn Gary for the Green Bay Packers. And I wrote him up a couple weeks ago thinking, man, this guy is getting healthy. He's snap shares increasing. And here he is playing Brett Rippon. He's got to be able to sack Brett Rippon. Nope. One tackle, 2 assists. Hasn't had a sack in his last 3 outings. It's not because of playing time anymore. He did have a big breakout blow up game early in the season with like 3 sacks, but just hasn't produced. And it's never been a real high tackle guy anyway. You got to have sacks for this guy to be a guy you want to start every week. And with those sacks in 3 weeks, that hurts. That being said, I'm not giving up on the guy. He just got a big contract. I think it was about $170 million over 4 years. And so obviously the Packers believe in him and they trust him to rebound to his previous form. And I do too. But boy, it hurt this week not to see more of an impact in the box score against a team that was pretty much a sitting duck.
Yeah, it's interesting. Other than the New Orleans Saints game where he had 3 sacks, he really has been underwhelming. And, him, I believe, coming off from an ACL injury, he was looking really, really good last year. It's like, okay, this is where he's finally going to break out. Just isn't showing it as much. That Packers team overall is just kind of bad. But I don't know, Joe, what you think about your former Michigan Wolverine over there, your Go Blue, but I don't know. Is there something to be concerned about with Gary, or you think he's going to get back on track?
Yeah, I definitely think he can get back on track. I was thinking that he was going to, continue off of what he did last year and have another good year. The Packers is just, they've really been a weird team, the transition over. But, to your point, I like to call out, though, because, against Brett Rippon and the Rams, the Packers actually played with a lead, and you figure you just really get after them, and just wasn't able to. But I think eventually we'll see him get back on track and get back to how he was playing last year.
So, Joe, who do you have as your dud from week 9?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jonathan Allen. He just coming off a game where he had to tackle in a hurry. And honestly, the last couple of weeks, he hasn't been that great. And, 2 weeks in a row with disappointing, kind of underwhelming performances. He only had 1 tackle as well the week prior. So just kind of wondering with Jonathan Allen, is there something to be said with his kind of disconnect with this team that he's on, and he's unhappy to be on the Commanders with his recent play?
That's a very interesting call out, right? You just saw Chase Young and Montez Sweat both get traded. Those were impact guys in that defensive line. And so, you've got all those players asking yourself, well, what are we going to be doing? And he's one that I believe he had a lengthy contract with them, not as, Daron Payne was a more recent contract extension. But I wouldn't be surprised if effort, I'm not questioning your effort, Jonathan, but I'm just saying that, when it comes down to it, like, I could understand, things have changed in that defensive line. I think that team I think Ron Rivera could be on his way out here. Then I just, not even to say he's doing a bad job. I just think that, you got the new owner. You saw that with the Broncos. They just completely just ripped the Band-Aid, tore it off, and start over. I can see that happening, and then who knows what's going to happen from there. But Allen has been a stud as an interior defensive lineman. I'm not concerned about him from a dynasty perspective, but this should be interesting kind of to monitor throughout the rest of the season. He may not be the Jonathan Allen that we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think Ron Rivera is gone. New owner, giving away is harsh, but just to trade away the two big defensive ends and not think about how you're going to pay those guys. And the thing about that is you look at the amount of money that was spent in the offseason on defensive tackles, and then the defensive end situation was really fascinating. There were no blue chip free agents at all. And so you had a bunch of journeymen making multi-year contracts, $20+ million a year, like DeMarcus Walker being one for the Bears. Like, what are we doing paying DeMarcus Walker all that? I'm sorry, DeMarcus, but you're a rotational guy, which is why the Bears traded for Montez Sweat. But so you got Jonathan, and so you got the Jonathan Allen now, and Daron Payne left with bookends that are marginal NFL players. And you mentioned effort there, Joe, and I saw posted on Twitter, somebody had taken the time to make a video montage of every Chase Young play and then every Casey Toohill play, because Chase Young was benched at late in the game. I don't know if he got dinged up or what, but Casey Toohill came, or maybe they just rotated. But anyway, Casey Toohill played like 13 snaps, and 11 of them counted, 2 were kneel downs. And like Casey Toohill showed a high motor, but he also looked like a little kid where somebody's just holding his head down and, he can't go anywhere. And then Chase Young is out there playing. I mean, the effort wasn't there. And it's just, it's just one guy. And maybe that was a factor in why he only fetched a 3rd round pick. But it makes you wonder if it's one, is it a cancer? Is there a problem in that locker room? I don't know. It's like, if they won, I mean, an easy counter argument is they just beat the Patriots, and the Patriots aren't great, but they're not the worst team in the NFL either. And so it's fascinating to see. But you certainly can't expect either Payne or Allen with the little assistance that they'll have on the edges now, and how weak the cornerback situation has been. That Emmanuel Forbes has not been able to earn a job as a 16th overall pick, and that's just it leaves them with a gaping hole in the secondary that they're just not able to fill with talent right now. It's Kendall Fuller and Benjamin St. Juste is shaky, and then what? Right? Derek Forrest was hurt. I don't think he's not back. He might be out for the year for all I remember. And so this is just a unit that's going to struggle to stop people. Has been struggling to stop people, and unless you're expecting Allen to pile up tackles and run defense, I don't know where you're getting your production from at this point.
So my dud from week 9, and it pains me to say this, is safety Jamal Adams. He had defensive grade of 55.9. He played a total of 65 snaps. He had 2 solo tackles, a tackle assisted, and a tackle for loss. Obviously, he's coming back from injury. He's had a number of injuries that have led him to not be on the field. But this Ravens game was an absolute blowout. I mean, they got absolute steamrolled by them. So maybe this is just something not to be concerned about. But, I'm curious, Joe, you already know what I did. Tripp, you don't. But I signed Jamal Adams to a 4-year deal in free agency, thinking that I think he could. I didn't pay too much, but I thought that maybe I could take the gamble. Did I make a mistake in that gamble? Is Jamal Adams, is he over the hill at this point?
I wrote him up as a guy that he could be a league winner down the stretch. I really think I don't know about 4 years from now, but as far as this year goes, I mean, he's in a position to succeed. And I just sometimes, like you mentioned, they just got blown off the field. The Seahawks did, and nobody's going to have numbers they're all anomaly type numbers in that situation, right? I mean, you get some weird games. Like one of the weirdest games I saw this past week was the Cardinals and the Browns, and Grant Delpit had a huge game, biggest game of the season. He had like 10 tackles and sack. The Cardinals only offered 40 tackle opportunities, and Delpit was 38, something like comically low number, and Delpit was on 10 of them. Because the Cardinals couldn't move the ball, right? They just had Clayton Tune in their quarterback, and had no ability to compete. And for whatever reason, the Seahawks had no ability to compete in this game. They just got run out. And when you see an output like that, I just think you got to throw those out as kind of, you need to see what these guys do in competitive games. And I use this week's as a illustrative point. The lines, all of the lines of this week's games are all 7.5 or less, with the exception of the Cowboys game where I think the Giants are planning on starting a pizza delivery guy at quarterback. So other than that, we got close games, right? And so you count on those close games. You're looking for production that you get out of a close game. And if you get a 37-3 game, I just think you got to dismiss that, unless it's in Orm, unless it's a situation where that team is headed to 0-16. And we know that's not the case with Seahawks. I think that they'll get back to a point where they're competitive again. I'm not really sure what their future is at this point. I mean, they've had a couple of really ugly losses where they've just gotten hammered by good teams.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, you got a good response, Steve. I didn't really know what to expect as far as a response, but you got good feedback. I've not ever been that great at, high of a Jamal Adams guy, especially, coming off the ACL. But, I guess we'll see down the stretch if Tripp's right with his call out. It could be a league winner. Maybe you need to look to trade Jamal Adams, Steve, and get him to a competitive team.
That was the whole plan, Joe. Sign him and trade him. I did the same thing with Daniil Hunter, and I got a first-round pick out of it, Tripp. So that worked out pretty well for me. So, he's got the name brand, man. If he just, if he could just stay healthy, that's the question. I mean, he was contemplating retirement. I saw that article, and I'm like, oh, boy, what did I do? But needless to say, so heading over to Week 10, guys, we're going to be giving our IDP Pro Tip of the Week. So, Tripp, who are you saying for your Pro Tip of the Week?
Well, I stole my thunder a little bit. I was looking at Justin Matabuke for this particular one here, with this sweet matchup against the Browns there. But I just go a different direction and offer a little bit of a different angle on a pro tip. But watching the Packers safeties a little bit, and I always really enjoy watching safeties and how they're deployed and keeping up with that for what it means for production. And we had Jonathan Owens has come back from the others to put up a big game last week for the Packers, and interestingly enough, he played a pretty box heavy role in against the Rams. And this is with rookie 7th-round pick Anthony Johnson and more of a deep role. And this is something that's been highly fluid this year. Darnell Savage, I think, is on IR. Certainly he's out this week. Rudy Ford was a late addition to the injury report last week, and that's why he missed the game. And so I think they only had 2 healthy safeties in that game. But anyhow, Ford is probably back this week. But it'd be interesting to see what the interchangeability is between those 2 players. Are they going to be kind of A and B left and right like they were earlier in the year, or have they found something here with Owens playing closer to the line of scrimmage? Because in the last game, Owens had played deep, and Ford had played closer to the line of scrimmage, and that wasn't successful. And so they flipped that a little bit with the rookie playing deep. And it's like, to have a rookie play deep is really kind of an interesting gamble in a way. So, he may not be back in there this week, but I think you got to give him a chance to develop. I hope they'll play him a little bit more. But I'm more interested to see if Owens is back as an asset for us, because he was an asset last year. And, I don't think the matchup is super sweet this year. But if he's in the box a lot, then maybe there's something to be said for it. I think the Packers have the Steelers this week, if I recall correctly. Yeah. And so, that there's an opportunity for a box safety to produce, because this is a team that is terrified of throwing the ball downfield, loves to run on 2nd and long, and so you just know the box safety's got to cheat up and make an impact. And so it's kind of a long shot here, but if he's a free square, and I'm a huge fan of free squares and safety, especially when you got a bunch of guys on bye like Reed Blankenship and Javon Holland, go out and try a free square and that has some upside. See if you can't pile up some tackles in that box.
They always talk about how Travis Kelce does when Taylor Swift watches the games. Oh,
come on, Steve, you're stealing my thunder.
But we don't hear about Simone Biles and what it looks like for, when it comes to Jonathan Owens. So now that he's back in the fold here for the Packers, coming over from the Texans, that's an interesting play. I don't think he's available in our league. I think one of our guys signed him in free agency, hoping he'd do something, but maybe he's starting to do something now.
Yeah, I don't know if he's still out there. Might have to go take a look, because, I could use a safety this week, especially being that all of a sudden, Tampa Bay decides that they don't want to use Ryan Neal. He racked up a 13 tackle game against Buffalo, and all of a sudden he dropped his snaps and he's looking like he's a backup at this point. I don't get it.
Oh, that's the risk of these IDPs, right? You get these guys 13 tackles. The reason they had 13 tackles because the offense kept going at them, right?
Yeah, right.
Something to be said
true.
for having good players on your field.
Yeah.
So, Joe, what's your IDP Pro tip for Week 10?
Yeah. My pro tip of the week this week is I think we're going to see the game for Leonard Williams. He's been disappointing the last couple of weeks. He's on a new team. His first home game in Seattle and playing in front of the 12s. And he's got a great matchup against the Commanders' offensive line. And he's going against Zach Howell. So I like his chances.
Yeah, Leonard Williams has been a big disappointment. I don't know what his snap count was. I don't know if you saw from last week. I don't know off the top of my head. I wonder.
I believe he was in like the 60s for his first game with the Seahawks. So
that's pretty high. I didn't know if they were kind of when they traded him, kind of ease him in there. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, Washington. I mean, we know that Zach Howell is a Zach Howell for a reason. So, if you have him, this is definitely the time to start him.
Yeah, 100%. It's like if you got him on your roster, start him now or cut him. Make that roster spot available for someone else.
Well, I remember last week we were talking, with Kyle, whether or not this is a guy you're going to start from here on out or not. So saw the matchup and think he definitely got to get him in there against the Commanders.
Mm.
So my IDP Pro tip of the week for Week 10 is to start edge rusher Montez Sweat. Another trade deadline here, Joe, guy. And the Chicago Bears pass rush, we've heard how bad it's been. And so they went ahead and made the trade for Sweat through which I believe him alone, doubled the sack total. Sweat did not have the best debut with the Bears. He had 2 solo tackles and 1 pass deflection, playing a total of 41 snaps. Sweat got paid the big bucks, and he got a 4-year extension. $98 million with $72.6 million guaranteed. That's roughly 75% guaranteed. It's a little rich for my liking. I don't know if I agree with you on that, Ryan Poles, but nevertheless, I think Bears fans are nervous, but I think him going up against the Panthers this week, they rank third, the third worst, in pass blocking according to PFF, and they've allowed the 7th most sacks this season. So I think Montez Sweat gets his first sack as a Chicago Bear, and so you got to make sure you start him this week.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, you talk about the Bears, though. I mean, they've got the most money to spend, in terms of cap space. They got to spend it on somebody to get this football team better. And, they got a bunch of draft picks, too, so they got to try something.
I wrote about Montez Sweat. I wrote that he was a fade for the rest of the season. I got some concerns about him there. So a couple things. One thing is that you mentioned that he doubled the sack total. He also almost doubled the tackle total. And the key takeaway there is that the tackles are being spilled to the linebackers in this defense. There, I think TJ Edwards is the number 1 overall IDP in some formats on footballguys.com scoring. And so. And Montez Sweat had like 32 tackles, twice as many as Chase Young while they were Commanders together. And so having him come over, it lowers his floor as tackle producer. And now he's playing on a defense with obviously not as much talent. And so I got my concerns. It's not a bad spot this week to get him going against the Panthers. The Panthers are, the defense and offense that's struggling a bit. So it's an interesting call. I think it's a risky call. I'm interested to see how it goes.
Well, you win some and you lose some, I guess. I got the league winner in Jamal Adams, and I've got the fade the rest of the year for Montez Sweat. So
that's right, Steve.
Got to take those gambles.
Well, that's what you mentioned with Belfield on the pod the other day, right? It's like it's an unknown. There's just a variable there when you get a trade, and you're trying to project a fit, and sometimes you're just polar opposite wrong, and it's fascinating to. We're in the business of trying to, prognosticate with incomplete information. Sigmund Bloom says that every year in the preseason, right? That's just, if you try to analyze fantasy football, that's what your task is. And so, the money that you mentioned for polls is real interesting. That's back to that point we made about the pass rushers. And there aren't going to be any blue chip pass rusher, very few anyway, that are going to be available in free agency. And so polls said, I got to get a guy. I can't keep rolling with DeMarcus Walker. I got to go get that. I got to go get somebody I can put in there. Yannick Ngakoue was on the street for a reason in August, apparently. So yeah, I mean, you got to appreciate that they needed to bite the bullet and get a guy. I'm interested to see how it all works out.
Well, and it's not like they really had much leverage. I mean, I think they gave like Yannick Ngakoue like a 1 year, like $10 million deal or something with like 8 million guaranteed. And this was like late in the offseason. I'm like, holy moly. When I saw that, I told Joe, I'm like, wow, how do you get that much guaranteed? But I mean, their defensive line is so bad. I mean, what does it say about Matt Eberflus, though? I mean, you're a defensive guy. You're supposed to, bring the best out of your defense. This is, you believe, your second season with the team. What are you doing with the defense? The defense is an absolute shambles. You trade Roquan Smith, then you bring in Tremaine Edmonds. You pay him basically roughly almost the same amount of money. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that Bears team, to be honest with you.
That's a good point. But part of that's GM, right? So what are you investing in? You've got a second round pick as a safety, with Brisker is interesting. You've got a ton of money piled up in Eddie Jackson, big dollars for 2 linebackers in free agency, and you're playing small ball with these other positions, right? They were looking at Larry Ogunjobi 2 years ago as a big prize. Now, forgive me, that might have been the previous GM, but that crashed miserably, right? Ogunjobi passed a physical, and they signed Justin Jones to be the 3-tech. This is a defense that needs a 3-tech to really drive it, and you got Justin Jones. I mean, he's okay, but if you want him to be the focal point of the defense at the point of attack, it's like, come on. I'm a strong believer that you've got to have 3 pressure points from your D line, the 2 edges, and one guy in the interior, and then you've got to have. You don't have to have a stud cornerback, but you have to have a good deep unit that can hold up in coverage. And you look at who the Bears are trotting out there. I mean, Greg Stroman and Josh Blackwell and one of the 2 Jalen Joneses in the league, and it's just a helter-skelter group of guys, and it's just I just don't think that they were really set up to succeed. And so I think that polls said, "Yeah, boy, this isn't working. We got to do something."
Man, some of those names, people are probably like, "Who?"
Well, it should be, right?
It really is. But Tripp, thanks so much for joining the show today. Where can others find your great work?
Well, I appreciate y'all having me on. I really enjoy talking football with you. And what folks don't know is we talked football for an hour before we even started recording. So really enjoyed jumping on and talking fantasy football and real football with you. I'm over at footballguys.com. This is my second season there. I drop a column called Reading the Defense every Friday, where I'm able to dig a little deeper and look at how defensive schemes and what kind of macro trends are affecting player values. And this week, I think I want to write a little bit about trade deadlines. So last week was the real NFL trade deadline. This week, we'll talk a little bit about the fantasy trades and strategies and go from there. So I invite everybody to check that out. I'm also at Dynasty Tripp on the app formerly known as Twitter. I'm always happy to take questions there and shoot football.
That's great. I definitely recommend that article. We love trades, Joe and I do. So it's always great, especially toward the trade deadline. Are you a pretender? Are you a contender? This is the time to think about those things. Start having those conversations. Get your ducks in a row to make those moves happen. So, so we'll be back next week for our Week 10 IDP recap with our Week 11 pro tips of the week. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.